That's
Okay, Simeon, welcome back. It's great to connect with you again. Last time we spoke, you were just planning your journey and it was in the late stages. And, even though we talk every day, we haven't done this in a while. So it's great to have you here. And you're in Winnipeg now, which is incredible.
yeah, it's
Vancouver, Kelowna,
Calgary,
Calgary,
Regina,
Regina,
and
and
now
now
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg.
Yeah, no, we've been making remarkable progress, especially with donations coming in and through support of our community members, and just with the connections that I've made with families and people living with type 1 has been remarkable. So I'm really proud of the progress that we've made so far, and we're just about to enter into the Ontario leg, which will be the longest leg of the trip.
Yeah,
I'm super excited to get that under my belt and then get into Toronto in less than a month.
fantastic. And how long are you going to be spending in Toronto, riding across?
So I'll get into Toronto on the 19th of July, and then I'll be leaving towards Kingston and Quebec on the 22nd of July.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
you know, to rest up and recover a bit from that long journey across the remote stretches of Ontario.
I honestly, we talk every day, and it's been just the challenges that you face, and we'll delve into that a little bit, but it's overall an incredible experience and an incredible journey that you've been on. Thinking back, I guess one of the things that stands out to me is in Vancouver, we had this one conversation, went for dinner and had a conversation with the restaurant owner, and you were just casually bringing up how you're cycling across Canada for type 1 diabetes, and the owner's face kind of lit up and he was like, "Oh, I have a daughter who has type 1." And so it's crazy how these experiences happen and how many people are truly impacted, not just by type 1, but any sort of chronic illness. But have you had any sort of other moments
Yeah,
like this along your journey?
absolutely. There's been a lot of moments where I've ran into people and they've told me stories about how their family, whether it's children or cousins or parents that also live with type 1. One of them, which was pretty crazy, was I was just leaving Sicamous, British Columbia. It was pretty early in the morning, so I stopped at a gas station just to get some Gatorade. Gatorade, if you're listening, please sponsor me. uh, I was getting some Gatorade, just kind of preparing for the day. The cashier at the gas station had seen my bike and my setup, and so she was asking me about kind of my trip and what I was doing, and I was telling her how I was cycling across the distance of our country, to raise money and awareness for type 1 diabetes. And the person behind me, he was an older gentleman, probably in his 50s, and he said, "Hey man, like I've been living with type 1 for 40 some years."
No
And so
way.
he showed me his tattoo on his arm, and I was just like, these are the things that you don't see. You don't really expect this many people to be living and affected by this chronic illness, but it touches so many people, and that's one of the biggest things that I've learned is so many people are struggling living with this condition. And so moments like that, it just reinforces my mission to try and make a difference for those people.
It's that connection and that shared humanity really that that's palpable in this journey. And this is basically what your journey is all about, is spreading awareness for type 1, but also just the chronic illnesses and people who have resonated with your story. Again, I take any moment that I can out of my day, if I'm meeting someone new, to tell them about your journey. Most of my friends are following along as well, because again, this is some once in a lifetime sort of journey, and your message of really wanting to bring Canada together. So I read your interview in Kelowna where you said, I really just wanted to bring Canada together. And so can you expand on that? And, how does biking across the country, especially for a cause like this, help bring Canadians together?
Yeah. Well, when I think back of kind of the inspiration and the motivation for why I decided to embark on this journey, really one of the biggest reasons why was, from my personal experience living with type 1 diabetes, this chronic illness, and feeling isolated and alone in a rural community growing up. I didn't feel that connection. And so part of that motivation was just being able to, symbolically connect all of our communities across the country. And, by pedaling on a bicycle over 7,500 kilometers for nearly 3 months, going through all these small rural communities, and even just having people who've been tracking the journey, following like the live location, pulling up to me on the highway, with their daughter that's type 1. And,
That's incredible.
where those are moments where I feel that connection, and that's an opportunity to show other people in those rural communities, that we are in this together ultimately. And it's been an incredible way to connect those communities. So it's really really a big reason why I decided to take on this trip.
Definitely your story is powerful and your journey is resonated with so many people. And we've been posting on social media. We've seen traction increase quite a bit. And recently you put out a call out for questions on Instagram, and people did not disappoint. The response was pretty overwhelming. So we selected a few questions to really go through and get your thought process. I will say a lot of them have to do with food and how you fuel yourself throughout the day, and we'll go through them. So let's start off with a question from at Tessellating Triangle. So she said, "You met my grandpa today. He's telling everyone about your journey. That's amazing. How does it feel to know you're making such a personal impact on people across the country?"
Yeah, super cool moment. Just being there was 2 days ago where I had a community member bring me some food on the side of the road, and that was a huge morale boost, especially just dealing with some of the challenges over the last few days with some higher blood sugars, the headwinds. And somebody reached out to me and was like, "Hey, like, we own this cafe in Brandon, we'd love to bring you some food." So he brought me some food. It was fantastic. Thank you, James. And so, anyways, after that interaction, I was sitting on the side of the road and just sat on my chair and was eating this lunch. And these people kind of pulled up to me on the side of the road, just making sure I was okay, kind of thing. And I've had a lot of interactions like that where people are really just making sure that I'm safe and I have everything that I need. But I feel an overwhelming amount of pride just knowing that people are really just there to support, and with the amount of people that have been sending me messages has been remarkable. So I feel quite privileged and honored to have the support that I do along the trip so far, and I know it's only going to get bigger from here. In the story, we still have over 4,000 kilometers to go, almost 5,000 kilometers to go, and so there's still a lot of people to connect with and a lot of people to learn about the story and to resonate with.
Yes, I mean that's incredible. That connection and the connections that you're making. Absolutely. And 7,500 kilometers is no joke, but you've already managed to do almost 2,000, and that's
20,
incredible.
2,500 so far.
2,500. Jeez.
25
Okay.
Winnipeg. Yeah.
So in relation to the intense amount of physical demand your body is facing right now, at Cole Pottie asked, "What do you eat in a day to prepare your body with the sheer physical demands you're facing? I can imagine nutrition is key."
Yeah. Well, so right now, for the first month, I've been burning an average of anywhere from 6 to 10,000 calories a day,
Wow.
which is a lot. So
I
honestly,
think that
my
was one of the questions as well.
my biggest strategy is eating whatever I can get my hands on. And it's kind of funny. So I started this trip, before I left. I weighed myself and I was 200 pounds and I was already lean. So I started at 200 pounds, and 27 days into the journey, I weighed myself last night and I've lost 24 pounds, which is so my biggest strategy is honestly just eating whatever I can put my hands on. And so whenever I have an opportunity to stop, a lot of these little communities, they'll have, smaller diners, or they'll have some fast food places, little grocery stores. I'll go up and eat whatever I possibly can, because, sometimes there'll be 100 kilometers in between places where you can have accessible food. So really just eating as much as I can, whatever I can, things that are dense, like caloric dense foods. So things that have lots of fats, things that have lots of carbs, especially carbs, and then just intaking a lot of electrolytes. So sugary drinks like Gatorades, Powerades, things that have electrolytes and carbs in them has been huge, especially just intaking those calories
Mm.
throughout the day. And then just lots of snacks like granola bars, some fruits, apples, bananas. Just constantly keeping those carb intake has been huge. But the biggest challenge is just finding enough food. Like, even just to eat 5,000 calories in a day when you're living a normal, quote unquote, normal life. That in itself is challenging. And so being able to eat enough food that my body needs has been the biggest challenge in terms of like fueling. But there's still a learning curve. And going through Ontario, there's stretches of 300 kilometers where there are essentially no services. So now I'm going to be kind of transitioning into bringing my own meals. So it'll be, lots of rice, wraps, things that are easily made, like pastas, and really just, yeah, trying to eat as much as I possibly can. It's not so much for me about the kind of food that I'm eating, but the sheer amount of food that I'm eating is really important.
So when you say traveling with your food, you're gonna cook the food on the road
That's
or on
correct.
your stops? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I have a cook set up. So I got a little pocket stove, and I have a kind of a cook kit with a pot, pan, utensils, everything that I kind of need to cook and prepare meals. So that's going to be my biggest strategy going through Ontario, is just having food that I can easily cook with water. So yeah, rice and pasta will be probably the biggest thing in my diet for the next couple of weeks as I go through Ontario, where there's limited services.
Solid amount of carbs right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, along the same lines, at CalScat asks, what's your fueling strategy? So we covered that a little bit. And then beyond just what you eat, how do you approach your meals and snacks to maintain your energy levels throughout the day? So I guess your energy levels, let's dive into that a little bit. How are your energy levels spiking sometimes 8 hours throughout the day?
Yeah, they're fleeting at moments, and a big part of the fueling management system that I kind of have is being able to have a decent breakfast. I find it's
Mhm.
really hard to cycle on an empty stomach. Yesterday, I cycled from McGregor to Winnipeg, so it was about 125 kilometers. And McGregor, Manitoba, is a pretty small community, so there wasn't really much for food options in the morning. So I was just kind of having some granola bars and whatever I had left in my bags for the first about 45 kilometers. And with the headwinds, it was about 3 hours on the bike before I got to Portage la Prairie, where I was able to stop and get some food. Stretches like that are challenging.
Yeah.
And kind of as I was talking about before, going into this Ontario stretch where I know there's going to be limited services, just being more prepared with foods that I can make for myself, kind of on the road in the morning. Oatmeal for breakfast, kind of thing. Just things that are quick and easy to prepare. Lots of calories, lots of carbs. Is going to be super important.
And during the times, you can have the best fueling strategy, but again, with the amount of exercise and activity that you're doing, Canadian Lizzie wants to know, how do you recover from the lows and stay stable for long periods of physical activity? This is a big one for anyone with type 1, and especially under such extreme exertion. What's your
Mm-hmm.
strategy?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I've been so focused, and a lot of my energy has been going to actually cycling, for sometimes 8 to 12 hours a day, and like being on the road for that long. A lot of energy just goes onto my focus of doing that. And then so sometimes it's hard to kind of talk about the diabetes aspect of it, but that is a huge part, probably the biggest part that I have to manage along the way. And so, kind of going into the fueling strategy, managing your diabetes on the road, there's that added layer of challenges. And my biggest strategy for lows is just number one, preventing them. Because whether you go low or you go high, although you might feel better in 15, 20, 30 minutes after a hypoglycemic episode, your body goes through a lot to try and recover from that, and it takes a huge toll on your body physically, emotionally, mentally. So the biggest strategy for me is preventing those before it happens. So fortunately, with my insulin delivery system, I can adjust where my insulin pump will try and correct me to. So I set my override, which is basically just a way to say a temporary insulin a dosage from like a normal level, from maybe 5.5 to zero point 0 millimoles per deciliter to about 9 to 10 millimoles per deciliter. So I automatically set my insulin to try and get me to that level. And so I'm constantly, my insulin pump is trying to keep me at that 9 to 10 range. That's a similar strategy that I use for when I'm flying, because obviously going low when I'm flying isn't a great thing either.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I'll also just reduce the amount of insulin that my pump is giving me. So right now I've reduced it to about 60% of my overall needs. And, just being super conservative with the amount of insulin I give for food. And a lot of the times I'll just be intaking carbs without any insulin at all. And so another part of that is, regardless of whatever your blood sugar might be, you still have to be cautious about ketones, because your body can develop ketones even if your blood sugar is, in theory, going low. You get ketones not because of your blood sugar, but because of the lack of insulin in your system. Another part of that is eating enough carbs where I can still take insulin throughout the day, and not go low, to prevent those ketones. I guess that's kind of the longer answer, but the shorter answer is just reducing my insulin and eating lots of carbs and just keeping a close eye on it. And then whenever my blood sugar does go a little bit higher, for whatever reason, whether it's, my insulin pod is leaking, or, I didn't take enough insulin for a meal that I had, just being super duper conservative with the amount of insulin that I'm taking for that, so it doesn't give me a crazy low on the side of the road.
I didn't even think of the ketones. I was just gonna pull up well, this is on Diabetes Express, but I don't know how many times I go on here to check your blood sugar. I'm not the only one. We've had a few people tell me that they're like, oh, I'll just check out throughout the day, Simeon's doing okay, and that's really your crew behind you that you don't really hear about, but
Mm-hmm.
I can see 0.05 units, and it's very, very minimal amounts. Even after you eat throughout the day, it's very small units. So that is a lot of decisions to make throughout the day. And
It's yeah, that's part of, like, that's the behind the scenes that people wouldn't necessarily think about or see. So when you think about doing any kind of ultra endurance um, task, like cycling across Canada, you think about cycling across Canada. You don't think about the all those decisions that you have to make to manage the diabetes aspect of it.
and so on a similar note, I guess Ad Cuffy asked, how many lows have you treated so far? So any rough estimate?
I don't know the exact amount. I would imagine it's probably close to 40 or 50. Obviously, there's some days where I'll have, a stubborn low. Like, there was a couple times where I've had stubborn lows that just wouldn't come back up, so I'd have to take, a 30-45 minute break kind of on the side of the road and just waiting for that to come back up. I don't know if you count that as one low or five lows, but so it kind of just depends on what your parameters are, I guess. But I feel like I've actually been doing pretty well with keeping that number fairly low, considering the amount of exercise that I've been doing. Yeah, there's definitely lots of challenging moments with low blood sugars, but like I said before, my biggest strategy is just preventing them before they happen.
And so say you do have a low, and what? So here I'll ask the question actually. So at Katie Mack is curious. She says, how do you manage your lows when you're on the road? Are there any specific strategies or tools that you're relying on in terms of specific items that you like to consume?
Yeah, so my go-to low snack is those, like, little fruit snacks, the fruit stations, or like the Welch's. Those are like a super packable kind of low treatment. So that's kind of my go-to snack. But like I've been saying before, biggest strategy is just keeping that carb intake as much as I can. I don't get there. But yeah, if I do end up going low, regardless of these strategies, which does happen, that's part of living with diabetes, is no matter what you do, some things just aren't going to work out. If I do go low, it's usually just, set up my chair on the side of the road, pull in like a little, like a range road kind of thing, get off the highway, and just sit down 15, 20 minutes, crush a bunch of carbs, wait for my blood sugar to come back up, and then keep going.
Wow, I can't even imagine. I do want to transition a little bit away from the lows, and I just feel sad when I imagine you sitting on the side of the road eating Welch's fruit stations alone. But so Jack says, unreal following the journey so far, bro. You're truly an inspiration. Bring it home, brother. So how does that kind of direct engagement from your followers impact you on the road?
Yeah, I mean, that's the motivation that keeps me going every day, just supportive messages and knowing how many people are behind this and how many people believe in this mission and the impact that we're making for people, and also the impact that it's making for myself. I feel incredibly supported from all these messages, and knowing the impact that it's having on families or even people that don't live with type 1, but, might be an inspiration for somebody to go out and be active or do something challenging that they wouldn't have done, regardless. Those are the messages that boost my morale and keep me fired up, and ultimately just keeps my eye on the end goal.
There was a question from Sean Gramledge about calories, so we answered that one, but I'll just display it on the screen regardless. And we'll move on to a few questions from Amy Bierman, and she asks, okay, so let's go to the end of the journey. What are you going to do to celebrate once you finish? What's your dream celebration, I guess?
Um, to be honest with you, almost all of my energy has been focused on getting there. All of my thoughts have been directed on the next kilometer, the next day, the next meal. I haven't thought too hard about the finish line. Obviously, it's a moment that I visualized a lot,
Mm.
but the most important thing is getting there. And we still have a long ways to go, a very long ways to go. So I haven't thought too hard about it. I think just the biggest thing is being able to share that moment with people. What I've learned is that it's not about the places, but it's about the people. And so being able to share that moment would be incredible.
So another question that sort of ties into this, what's your favorite place? What has been your favorite place cycling through so far? So maybe any particular stretch of the road or event that stuck with you?
We've covered a lot of different places. There have been some pretty incredible moments. It's hard to pinpoint exactly one. I had an incredible moment seeing the Alberta Welcome to Alberta sign, getting through kind of the big stretch of the mountains up on the
It's a
Kicking Horse
good
Pass,
province.
and that was an incredible sense of fulfillment. You know, especially coming up one of the biggest mountain passes in the entire country. It's actually also the highest point of elevation along the Trans Canada Highway. I think it's around 1,400 meters of elevation at the
Wow.
Kicking Pass summit, and so you know, just climbing through the mountains every day for a week and a half, and then finally seeing that Welcome to Alberta sign was absolutely incredible and just such a wonderful moment. And that was kind of my first sense of like, okay, we're actually making progress here. We're covering distance. So
Yeah.
that was really cool, and just going through the mountains was surreal. And then also just sharing moments at these events with people and with families, with children, and seeing the impact that it's making on them has been really powerful for me. And then also, honestly, I've been loving some of the days through the prairies. A lot of people like to, I don't want to say hate on the prairies, but a lot of people can't find the beauty and the vastness of the Canadian prairies, but I've been trying my best to, and there are some very incredible places to see through Saskatchewan and Manitoba. A few days ago, it was really cool to see the first bit of forest that I've seen in almost 2 weeks, coming through Saskatchewan, the rolling hills in Western Alberta, and there's not much for forest or trees in that part of the country. But I was just coming out of a valley in Manitoba. It was my first valley for pretty much 2 weeks, and at the top of it was kind of the start of the forest. So that was a pretty cool moment too. Just also reinforces that we are making progress.
Did you catch any wildfire along the way or
No, the the worst day of smoke was actually cycling from Banff to Canmore, and so that was all the interestingly enough the easterly winds pushing everything from Manitoba to Alberta. But that was kind of a rest day. I did 30 kilometers that day just from Banff to Canmore, but the smoke was pretty heavy.
and how about this? So we have a question again from Amy Veerman. She asks, "What do you eat beyond the general? Can you give us a snapshot of a typical day's eating on the bike?" So we talked a little bit about this. Let's just go through your last meal. Let's go through yesterday's meals because that was a pretty massive stretch. So what did you eat? Morning, lunch, and dinner.
So morning, yesterday wasn't quite the typical day because I've been staying with some relatives in Winnipeg. I had a wonderful steak dinner last night. It was so good. But I woke up, I had three of the granola bars that I had left in my bag. I had some Gatorade to carb up in the morning. And then that was the stretch from McGregor to Portage la Prairie, where it's about 40 kilometers without kind of much for services. So then I stopped and got some pasta, a salad, and I had a little bit of a cheesecake dessert to get those carbs and fats in. So that was fantastic. And then it was apple on the road, a couple more granola bars, and then when I got into Winnipeg, it was a lovely steak dinner with we did steak, salad, potatoes, vegetables. It was awesome. It was really good.
Listen, we got to get the weight back up again. So whatever works.
I think I'll still be losing a few more pounds before I get to St. John's, but
Jeez. Okay, so I think that's the extent of the questions that I wanted to cover from Instagram, but I do want to come in with a few of my own. And this is sort of from the Diabetes Express team as well. You know, the first thing that anybody ever asks me is, do you have a van following behind you? Now, I know the answer to this, but I think it's important for the audience to know as well. So, is
mhm.
there a van following behind you?
No, there's not. It is a fully self-supported trip. There have been stretches of the road where I've had, fortunately, that support. And leaving Thunder Bay, I might be able to get some support for a few days, just kind of where the shoulder gets pretty thin past Thunder Bay, so that'll be nice. But other than that, it's a fully self-supported trip. I have all of my gear on my bike, everything that I need to survive. You know, all my diabetes supplies, insulin, all the low treatments that I could ever need, things to cook with, sleep with. I got everything on my bike. So it's a fully self-supported trip.
I want to know your thoughts. So were you disappointed at all that not as many people as we were expecting showed up? And are you able to share what the purpose is of hosting community events in these major cities? So a double part.
Definitely not support or sorry, definitely not disappointed. The whole reason of doing these events is to bring our communities together. It doesn't matter if we have 500 people show up or one family show up. The biggest thing to me is to make that connection with people and to make an impact for somebody, regardless if it's one person or 50 people. To me, the biggest thing is, in Regina, we had a couple families show up, and it was amazing to connect with them. And so to call that a disappointment would be beyond me. It's incredible that I've had that opportunity to connect with people, and like I said, it's just an opportunity for people to come out and support, but also to get some connection, and hopefully they can meet some people in their communities that they can connect with and build that lasting support.
The impetus was from you to have these events across Canada, and the purpose of these events again. You have these connections with individuals and families, and you know, I guess we just want to delve into the purpose of, in your mind, what it was.
Mm.
Have you had any individuals who don't have diabetes show up at these events?
Yeah, lots. And honestly, the short, the sweet, and the honest answer is to bring our communities together. That's the entire purpose. It doesn't have to do with supporting me. It just has to do with bringing people together. And if people show up to support the mission or support somebody who's living with a chronic illness, that's fantastic. It's just about bringing people together.
That's fantastic. And Simeon, overall, this has been an amazing conversation and absolutely fascinating the way that your mind works. What do you say in the morning when I call you or when I message you? How you doing, Simeon? What's your
It varies day to day, for sure. I've been keeping a very positive and optimistic outlook on things, and I just remind myself in some of those challenging moments that what an incredible opportunity this is to have. And when things do get hard, and I feel whether it's I don't want to say I feel alone because I haven't felt alone because I know so many people have been supporting me. But those challenging moments where I'm exhausted, tired, cold, wet, hungry, like this is what it's all about. These are the moments that define a journey. Along this trip, moments like those, I'm also carrying the hopes and inspirations of so many people, and I think about how many people would give anything to have the opportunity that I have today. And when I look back at some of those challenging moments and I think how hard it was to keep going, but I did regardless, it's a very powerful feeling of fulfillment, a sense of accomplishment. And there's never been a doubt in my mind that I can't make it or I can't do it. It's just putting in the time, the effort and energy, but also with the support of the amount of people that have gotten behind this, helped me through those challenging moments. So when I wake up in the morning, and a lot of the times my first thought is like, I don't want to roll out of this sleeping bag or this bed or whatever it is. I just remind myself like what an incredible opportunity this is to be able to have these challenging moments. Like how many people get to push themselves this hard? It's really remarkable. So just reminding myself that I'm incredibly fortunate, and a lot of people would give everything to have this opportunity is what keeps me going.
I just want to say the answer that I was looking for was "Let's go." That every single day, that's your answer, and every not a negative word comes out of your mouth. So as we wrap up, you've inspired a bunch of Canadians across our land, and not just those with type 1 diabetes, but any chronic illness, and who are facing their own daily challenges. So final message, I know we've talked a lot, but what is your final message for people across Canada who are following your journey and looking for that spark of inspiration?
Anything is possible. Anything is possible. When I first had this idea, cycling across the country, going across our entire country on a pedal bike, it seems impossible when you think about it, and the amount of people, friends that have said, I would never be able to do this. It's like, no, like you would be able to do this. And that's the biggest thing is you just need to believe in yourself, like honestly believe that you can do whatever you put your mind to. I'm such a big believer in that. And I hope that this journey can demonstrate that. I'm not anything extraordinary. Anybody can accomplish whatever they set their minds to. Anything is possible. You just have to believe.
Simeon, Simeon King, thank you for joining us and for your incredible honesty and you know for being an inspiration. We're all rooting for you to bring it home. I want to give a plug to your website again. We are sitting at 44,300, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
For type1.ca. I should probably have pulled that up beforehand, but here's a quick plug to your website. We are sitting at 4,337, hoping to make that $100,000 goal. Simeon, thank you again. And I'm hoping that we're able to do this again in a little bit, get some more questions along the way. Thank you for joining us, and we'll connect again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll talk to you in maybe Ontario, Toronto, Quebec, somewhere along the way before we finish.
Sounds like a plan.